I believe the best way to influence, either in a small way or in a large way, is to approach everything with a servant's heart.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs, ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
Now I am thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, a chief influencer, and in DC, I think we could maybe even say an influencer in chief. Sharon McBride is a pioneer in the field of public affairs and grassroots mobilization, both in the United States and around the globe. Sharon believes fervently in giving people a voice in government, and throughout her career, she's advocated for workers and small businesses, helping them connect with policymakers. During nearly 2 decades at eBay, she led public affairs operations and created a first-of-its-kind program that shaped public policy through customer impact storytelling. Before this time, companies amplified the voices of employees, but they hadn't really done that for their customers. So this was a major innovation that we'll hear about tonight. Sharon created a customer grassroots network of more than 1 million eBay sellers from 100-plus countries. She also headed the eBay Public Policy Lab, conducting research on the company's global economic impact and empowering small enterprises for global commerce. Sharon even imported the concept of Capitol Hill visits to Europe, originating the concept of fly-ins in Brussels. Currently, Sharon serves as the Global Head of Policy Mobilization at DoorDash, where she launched Grassroots, DoorDash's advocacy network, to amplify the voices of DoorDash stakeholders. She's also the chair of the board of directors for BIPAC, the premier political resource for the American business community, and we're very happy we have BIPAC folks with us tonight. Before all of this, Sharon cut her teeth on presidential campaigns, Supreme Court nominations, and on Capitol Hill. Her innovative work has been recognized by the Public Affairs Council, National Journal, Campaigns and Elections magazine, and she's received eBay's Luminary Award and Professional Women in Advocacy's Veteran Practitioner of the Year Award. She earned her undergraduate degree in communications and political science and theater arts. I love that connection, from Northwestern University, and a master's in arts management from Carnegie Mellon University's H. John Heinz School of Public Policy. I had to cut that bio way down and all my research. I mean, there's so much more that Sharon's done, but she is such an impressive person. We're lucky to have her with us tonight. Please help me welcome Sharon McBride and congratulate her on being named a Chief Influencer. So Sharon, you've accomplished a lot of firsts in the world of public policy, but before we get into those, we're here in the Hall of States, mere steps from the U.S. Capitol. What is your philosophy when it comes to influencing public policy through advocacy?
I believe the best way to influence, either in a small way or in a large way, is to approach everything with a servant's heart. We're all here to serve each other in our communities and organizations, and I think that is how I approach really everything in my life.
We've talked about that before. I love that. And where's the inspiration come from?
Well, I think it comes from several places, but I would have to say probably my mother. I think even when, as a child, and you see that role modeling of a servant's heart, but also how to express gratitude and how to be in relationship with people, and what does that mean? Even if it's a small kindness, my mother writes a handwritten thank you note. Someone helps her load her groceries into her car. She's writing a thank you note. And so the little things like that, I think, developed in me. That's how you can be successful, yes, and drive your career forward, but also that's for the betterment of society too.
There are a lot of folks who, are cynical about Washington. They may think nobody here cares what I have to say. And, you've really sort of brought a different perspective to those people. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think why I find this work most fulfilling is amplifying the voices of those folks who don't think they have a voice. The dasher, the eBay seller who owns a small business often says to me, why would they care what I have to say? And I give them a platform and I have a connection, and you're all of a sudden not just advancing your particular cause for your organization, but you're also offering that person an opportunity for professional and personal development, right? And for them to understand and have pride in what they do, and that people actually do care. I've been doing this a really long time. I'm not cynical about it. I do believe our elected officials, they really don't care what the DoorDash lobbyists say or the eBay lobbyists say. They really want to hear from their constituents. I think that is true on both sides of the aisle.
We won't tell the lobbyists.
Right.
But no, it's so important, the trend that anybody who, is studying this through GSPM or who is spending time on Capitol Hill, they hear that grassroots voice is so important. And I wonder if you could talk about how has advocacy changed over the course of your career? Obviously, the technology world has changed a lot, but, where would you say things have gone from when you started?
Yeah, well, I think it has, the technology certainly has evolved, and we're engaging via text message and social media and communicating to our elected officials through those channels. But I still am a very firm believer in people. I talk to a lot of tech companies and sort of advise them on a volunteer basis. And I say, you really need to get on the phone with your customers. And many tech companies don't want to do that, right? They want to, as my husband say, that's not very good for a podcast. But they want to type and they want to communicate digitally to their customers or their advocates. And I said the best way is to have in-person meetings now that I think COVID has passed for the most part, and get on the telephone and talk to your customers. And that also is a high-touch point with your customer that's going to build a relationship. I use this anecdote all the time. I had these eBay sellers who would tell me, yeah, I have to sell on Amazon. It's a great platform. He said, but I'm in a relationship with eBay. And that was because of the government relations and advocacy network that we built. You're also adding, a business value through those relationships, and again, making people feel like they're important.
Yeah. Take us back to the creation of this network. For folks who maybe, aren't familiar, what did grassroots advocacy look like? Who was going up to Capitol Hill, and how did eBay, under your leadership, change that model?
So when I got to eBay, I realized, and I had somewhat of a political background and brought some of those campaign tactics to that, is that eBay at the time only had employees in California. And that was really the tradition. Most companies only do employee grassroots at that time. And I thought, well, that's not going to help much. We need to, and most of eBay's issues were federal, so we needed to make sure we built a nationwide network. So knowing how passionate eBay sellers were about the platform at that time, I thought, what if we created this network? These are not, they're not employees, but they are in partnership with us. And if an eBay seller sells an item, eBay benefits. So it's a mutually beneficial business model. So that certainly helped. And the reaction that we got, both internally and externally. Now, I did have to get over the hump that this is a labor-intensive prospect. I need folks to be calling sellers and meeting them in person and that sort of thing. There's a certain amount you can do electronically. But mostly at the time, it was a very practical decision that our employees were only in California and a few in Utah. And we needed to talk to the Speaker of the House who lived somewhere else, and so that's really how it started. It wasn't that, I don't think at the time I thought, oh, I'm starting something very innovative. I was just trying to solve a problem that we had,
You didn't know you'd win all these awards and other companies were going to ask you how to model this. It sounds like you probably had to do a lot of education for these sellers who, maybe don't know how Washington works. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, really. I always tell our sellers or dashers now, or our DoorDash merchants, that the member of Congress or the elected official wants to hear your story. You don't need to necessarily be an expert on the policy. We'll certainly do trainings of the policy. I do think it's important for them to understand what we're talking about and not sort of send them in there with not the knowledge of the process. So we'll do some training sessions. But I think the most important thing is bringing that storytelling and that narrative of this is what's happening in your district, and this is how this rule would impact you. On DoorDash, what's the merchant impact? What's the customer impact? What's the dasher impact of this piece of legislation, which is super interesting at DoorDash at being a three-sided marketplace. There's so many different constituencies, and so a law is going to impact all those, the workers, the small businesses, and the consumers.
A lot of times policymakers need that education from the actual constituents. And you shared a story that it was so funny to hear this about how early in the days of eBay, the way that would be regulated was just totally kind of almost comical.
Yes,
Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, eBay there is no DoorDash, there is no Uber, eBay was the original platform, economy and app-based platform. And so they were rules or legislation introduced in some of the states on auctioneering. And they were going to require our eBay sellers to take hog calling classes. And we would have meetings with these state reps and saying, no, that's not, like, we're online. We're not, they don't really need to know that. And so, that's funny.
It just kind of goes to show how important it is to have the people who are affected every day by regulations have a voice with their policymakers.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we did on our fly-in, one of our very first fly-ins, where we had a seller come in from every state, we gave them, seems kind of funny, but we did a booth, and we had them have their physical items, what they sold in the booth, and their eBay store on a monitor, and we brought the members of Congress through to meet with their constituents in that way, and it was that physical manifestation. I do think Zoom is great and digital is great, but that physical manifestation of, oh, this is a store. This is people selling things, and here are the items that this person, and some of them were funny, like people. There was a great eBay seller, one of my great advocates, sold tires on eBay. So we rolled in a big tire. And I do think that again, technology is terrific, but building these relationships, visualizing what these folks are, up against with in-person meetings, I think can really make a difference.
Yeah, you're showcasing this is not a separate economy or just some fake. This is a real economy.
And these are people living in your district, and they might have a store, a physical store, and sell online.
Yeah. You're equipping so many people with the tools to be able to contact their members of Congress, contact their senators, tell them what they think. Do corporate leaders ever worry, well, if I give them those tools, what if they say things that I don't want them to say?
Right, yeah, that's certainly always, a risk. I have a personal philosophy is that if we have made a commitment, if I tell you, Anthony, you're a dasher, please come to this meeting with this member of Congress, and we've talked about the policy issues, and you talk about something that you want to talk about, that's your right. If there's a lot of talk in grassroots, particularly in digital mobilization, about tailoring letters and tailoring emails. I have a personal philosophy that I let every letter go through, right? If people are personalizing their letters and they've taken the time, and I've made a commitment saying, we want to amplify your voice, I'm not going to say, well, not your voice because you didn't say the right thing, or not your voice, only your voice. That's not, you lose credibility and integrity, and I think that if you're saying you're amplifying your voice, that's one of the risks you have to take.
Sounds risky, though, to
Yeah,
some
yeah,
leaders,
sure,
right?
of course.
But it's risky to not have that integrity, too, I suppose.
Right, because if you're trying to build a mutually beneficial relationship with your advocates, you have to start building trust. Think about, if you're, I always say, like, people say they're customer obsessed, but, are you customer obsessed? I mean, because this is in service to your customers. And you're gonna, yeah, sure, there's a little bit of risk, but I think the other way is you're gonna lose that trust, and then they're gonna go somewhere else.
Do you have any examples of where you're bringing these constituents to connect with policymakers and then they have their own issues?
Yeah, I do. I had a wonderful eBay seller from South Carolina who unfortunately, tragically lost her child to an opioid addiction. And we actually took it one step further and helped her make her case to this senator that she was meeting with. And we're like, absolutely. I can think of actually several of those types of examples. Again, I'm in the business of helping people grow personally and professionally, right? And so if I can help that person, A, it's the right thing to do, but B, if I help you in that way and make those introductions, aren't you going to be more loyal to my brand? I think so.
Talk about elevating people's voices, trust, relationships. And I just love this because I think for so many people who just see DC on the common media narrative or, watching Scandal or something like that, I think they might be surprised, but very happy to hear that that's sort of part of the ethos that you and your team are bringing.
Absolutely. I think that's, it can't be transactional. I think a lot of times people in this space only think about the recruitment of the advocate and the activating of the advocate. I like to think of it as recruitment, engagement, activation, engagement, right? Think about yourself. If somebody called you and said, oh, Sharon, would you testify in front of this, congressional hearing? And I'm like, sure, that's happy to do it. And then you never hear from them again until they need you again. I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, just how would that make you feel? Kind of used, And so to build the engagement, both at step 2 and step 4, you're going to keep your advocates, you're going to keep them warm. You're going to keep them feeling great about your brand. And so that the next time that something does come up, they're enthusiastic about participating.
Yeah, it makes me think some phone numbers pop up and you're really excited. Then sometimes people call and you say, what do they want this time? So
you have to
want
also
have that.
commit, and that's why it's a little labor intensive. You also have to commit to being a customer service agent. Going back to sort of the servant's heart mentality. I always put that in my job descriptions when I'm hiring folks. There is a big, you're on the phone with our customers and they may be having a problem with something else, business related with their dashing or with their eBay selling, and you must take the time to help them solve that problem. And again, that builds loyalty and trust and enthusiasm about your programs. And at eBay, and I think we're building this at DoorDash too, we were able to prove that people who were involved in the government relations activity or the advocacy, we call it the Small Business Advocacy Network at eBay, were stickier to the site. They bought more, they sold more, and we ran that every couple of years. We would run that study so we could also prove our value to the business. And then, then the marketing team is coming to you and the CEO's office is coming to you and saying, I need a focus group, or I need, the government relations, they have the best contacts with their customers. Let's go to them. So also, from a very practical standpoint, again, adding value and a service to your overall business.
I would imagine that's the dream for a government relations or public affairs office, that they're seen as that valuable. They have those strong relationships with the customer trusts them. We need to know how to reach them. And by elevating the customer's voice, they feel, you've proved it through data, deeper loyalty to the brand.
Right.
They're stickier to the
Right,
platform.
right. And they're super fans.
Yeah. On DoorDash, DoorDash is such an interesting company. You mentioned customer obsession. The company does something that makes everybody know what it's like to be a Dasher. Can you talk about that?
We do. And our chief marketing officer just did a segment with Anderson Cooper and Bobby Flay, where it's called a We Dash. So everyone at the company is required to dash so that we can live the Dasher experience. And we just love it. I mean, we'll do it in groups. Rob and I did one together. He actually taught me how to do it. And I think it's really fun, but also you're living that experience. You're living, what is that Dasher experience? Oh my gosh, you have to find a parking place. Oh my gosh, the food's not ready. Oh, how to interact with a merchant. And then the customer on the delivery end, right? And so again, and my team is gonna do also what we call We Support. And we did this at eBay, is to sit down with a customer support agent and listen to the incomings, right? Because again, we're trying to build relationships with Dashers and merchants and customers. We want to know what the problems are and what's the best way to help people solve those.
That's great. What a great way to get. I'm sure so many problems.
Our
have been
CEO
solved
does
from
it.
that.
I mean, everyone has to do it, which is, and I don't think it's really a have to. I think people are like, oh, that's kind of fun.
They want to be in this. I'm a Dasher on the other end.
Okay, good.
I receive a lot of those deliveries.
Thank you for your
takeout.
business.
When we look at this whole concept of chief influencers, right? You stand above your peers in so many ways for the work that you're doing, and we see that in different industries. One of the themes we hear from a lot of chief influencers is that it can be tough to know how to share their work without feeling too self-promotional. A lot of leaders tell us they sort of struggle with that balance. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your philosophy of how you've embraced elevating others as part of your influence to get this message out there. Because a lot of people are contacting you asking, how did you build this over the last, decade plus, and how can I do it? And you have to get that message out.
Yeah, well, it's really been interesting over the years that companies as diverse as, General Motors and Intuit and, non-tech companies are now looking at this customer advocacy idea and bringing that into their public policy. I don't know. I'm not a great self-promoter. I prefer to lift others up, whether it's my team members or our advocates or colleagues. I like to, quietly influence and lift others up. So I guess that's how I'd.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask you that question is because I think for a lot of leaders that struggle with that, they find that if they make it about others, which I think you do so naturally, and you've done that for, literally building a network of over 1 million people to lift up their stories, not just to transactionally get your message out, but to make it their own, whether it's about someone whose daughter had a crisis and they wanted to know how a senator could change policy. I think that's a really good lesson for leaders in any industry to figure out it doesn't have to be just about me and my story. It's going to have a bigger impact if I uplift others.
Yeah, I think people really sort of make a mistake about that. I think, you can influence your community, you can influence your neighborhood, you can influence your family. And I think that you don't really need to have this, I do get a little frustrated with some folks who say, I want to change the world. Well, start with yourself, start with your family, start with your community, and the rest of that will come.
Sounds like that lesson from Mom.
Yeah, right.
Back there. I want to, as a last question before we open up to the audience, I know that so many chief influencers get their inspiration outside of their core industry from looking at their peers, but they learn things from others in unsuspecting places. And I wonder if you could share any place you've gotten inspiration outside of your direct peers in Washington.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You and I talked about this in preparation for this. At first I thought, well, Teddy Roosevelt, it's not the critic who counts, is one of my favorites, right? It's really easy to dismiss and criticize. But I really always fall back on Lily Pulitzer. And I don't know if you all know the story of Lily Pulitzer and the brand, but Lily Pulitzer was a socialite. I mean, she was a very wealthy, married James Pulitzer, who was the grandson of the Pulitzer Prize founder. And they were living in Florida, and as a sort of a side business, had a citrus orange grove. And so she decided, she was bored. And so instead of, doing the socialite thing, she decided she was going to Worth Avenue, which is in Palm Beach, and she was going to open a juice stand. She wanted to add value. She wanted to work. She wanted to contribute to her society. So she starts making the juice, and what happens is all the juice goes all over her clothes. And so that's why she decided to make the colorful shifts that everyone knows today. So I love that story, not only because I think it's an inspirational story about a woman who didn't have to work, but still wanted to, again, add value to her community, help out the farmers of her husband's business, and be out, with them. But also that she pivoted, right? She's like, well, juice isn't really, doing it. People really loved these dresses that she started. So she wore these dresses, and I guess she had a helper or a friend. And then all these other women would say, where'd you get your dress? And so that is how the Lily Pulitzer story started.
I love that. And I think the idea that you can make a contribution to your community in ways that you don't
It's
have
very
to.
unexpected.
Anybody who comes to Capitol Hill for a fly-in or is doing a Zoom with their member, I mean, they don't have to do that. But they're doing it to help not only themselves, but others. And you're finding ways to unlock that
Right, and just
spirit.
like, it's interesting you say that, because just like a member of Congress is representing their constituents in their district, I always just say to advocates who come to the Hill or go to Brussels, or we did a fly-in in Michigan and Springfield, Illinois this year, it's like you're also representing Dashers. Like, you are actually a leader now in the Dasher community. You're getting this opportunity to tell your story to this state rep, but there's 1,000 Dashers behind you.
Yeah.
And think about how much pride that gives them, and an opportunity that was so unexpected, for them. So I just love that when they're like, oh, wow, it's great.
And they go home and show the selfie and
Right,
brag
and
about the
then
experience
talk to
they
their,
had.
then they talk to their community, and hopefully they'll talk positively about DoorDash or that experience, and they grow and they tell their children about it, and so I do think there's some ripple effects of this type of
100%.
work.
Yeah, when you lift one person's voice, it does ripple, doesn't it? It kind of attracts others to that. Would it be okay if we took some questions from the
Sure,
audience,
I'd love it.
Sharon? Love to take a few questions. Does anyone have a question for Sharon? Don't be shy. Always takes a second for the first one. Yes, sir.
Hi, Sharon. Bernard Tony. I too love the poem by Roosevelt. It's not the critical counts, and being the man in the arena. In that same vein, what challenges have you had at the executive level, at the C-suite level, being able to drive change? And have you had any personal challenges being able to make the impact that you desire to make?
And just for the audio, the question is any challenges that you've had driving change. Corporations are known for being bureaucratic, and it's very difficult sometimes to make change. And so what strategies have you found?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I think, when you're starting something that no one's ever tried before, were certain folks, the legal department and others who were like, well, we don't want to distract from, selling our products and having people use them. And is that gonna distract? Is that email solicitation or that phone call going to diminish us in other ways? And it's not, I tried to tell them it's not what is the cliche about the pie? It's not, we're not losing one, it's actually, adding on. So I think those were a few of them. I will say, what's great about tech and sort of the Silicon Valley mindset is they are more willing to take some of these risks. So in that vein, I think I've been really lucky to have very supportive, very, go for it. Now, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But again, you have to be in the arena and take those risks and learn from them.
And it sounds like that data that you mentioned earlier, the best way to showcase the value of what you're doing is to report back and saying, it's not only are we not distracting them when we're asking them to do this, they feel more loyal to us because we asked them to do it. And I think that's such a great leadership lesson. Sometimes people feel like in relationships, I don't want to ask for too many things. And others will say, no, actually, the more that you engage with somebody, actually, it deepens the relationship.
Right. And as you go along and you prove the concept, I remember my second CEO at eBay came to me and says, what would it take for us to get an eBay seller in every congressional district? Put together a little plan. So, again, I didn't ask for that. I didn't put a proposal together. And if you prove your worth every day, and you don't have to necessarily self-promote, but make sure you're telling your story and you're putting the stories of others in front of yours, I think those opportunities will come.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Maybe time for one more question, if anyone has one. I bet we have one more out there. Yes.
Hi, Sharon. As a pioneer in this space and a woman leading the charge, what advice would you give your younger self?
What advice would you give your younger self? What a great question.
Great question. My younger self, I would not worry so much. Also, my older self. I feel like personally and professionally, Catherine and I were actually talking about this morning. It's like, this is what an abundant life, what an amazing opportunity. We really all have been given. And to do this work, I feel so blessed to have had these opportunities that really others, gave me a chance to do. And I would say, don't lose sleep over it. Go for it. It's going to all work out. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
We all need that reminder from time to time, so thank you. I was thinking about your interesting major in college as a theater major as part of what you studied, and that is not probably super common for people who move into government relations, but what a theater person wants to do is captivate an audience and make them feel something, right? And I was thinking about the role that you've had at eBay and now what you're doing at DoorDash. And, a major outcome of that relationship that you're driving with advocates who come from Kansas City or California or wherever to Capitol Hill to get their message out is they leave with a feeling, don't they, that they've made an impact and they have a little kind of spring in their step. So maybe you
I do think that's true. I do think that's true. I mean, I do think the connection that you're taught in theater, and I grew up doing theater and PBS specials and all that sort of thing, and I do think that the fulfillment that I get from this work is very similar, because my parents used to say, well, why do you like that? I said, I love it when I see the audience clap or smile. It wasn't for me an ego thing, oh, you're so wonderful. It was more like I made their day. Yeah. They smiled when I sang that song or whatever. Yeah. And I think that was what I really revved me up. And this work too, to get to be on the road and meet with dashers and merchants or eBay sellers and see them grow, see their eyes light up, say, oh, you chose me to do this, and those opportunities that I've been able to give others is. Again, I get a little emotional about it because I feel so truly blessed to do this work.
Well, we feel blessed to have had you. You made our eyes light up here at our first in-person event, and many other people there, their ears will, whatever the equivalent of light up is as they hear it. So please help me thank Sharon McBride for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.